I always find it interesting how certain games can just get an absolute stranglehold over genres to the point that when a new game is released with inside that genre, we look at it and we say, that's clearly a knockoff of insert original game here. Well, that is exactly what we're going to be talking about today with Nexomon, which is a turn-based creature battler, which is clearly inspired a little bit, even in namesake, by Pokémon, specifically the older Pokemon games, but with its own charm to boot. This review is going to be covering the visuals, the combat, the story, and how it holds up compared to some of the games that influenced it, with a final overview, otherwise known as the SWAS score. Ladies and gentlemen, the SWAS score stands for Story, World, Action, Sound, and Style. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the positives first. Just before we do, though, if you like the reviews, definitely go ahead and make sure to hit that subscribe button, ring the bell notification if you want YouTube to alert you when I upload a video, and let's hop straight into it. Sometimes in these reviews, if I'm being completely honest, I struggle with things to talk about, especially if the game is a little bit more bare bones or it underdelivers in certain aspects, but it is quite the opposite with Nexomon, and that was proved by my notes on this. These are by far the longest notes I've taken on any game so far when I'm preparing for one of these reviews, so I am excited to share this with you guys, and I hope that you'll enjoy the game as much as I did. So first of all, let's go ahead and talk about the positives here. Of course, the visual aspect is very simple, as you can see from the background, but appealing. So it has a very clean, vibrant art direction that suits the game's tone and setting. It doesn't try to overdo it, which helps to keep things just really focused and charming as much as it possibly can. So there's no huge sprawling set pieces just for the sake of sprawling set pieces like we see in some games, like Diablo 4 looking at you, and it's just straight to the point. There's small areas for you to go through. They look fantastic, and it is what it is. Now let's go ahead and talk about the story as well. So the story definitely is cliche, though it seems to be by design, and it does actually pull it off very well. So it fully embraces all the game tropes with humor. There's a lot of meta commentary and a lot of fourth wall breaks as well. Simple things like characters saying, well, you know, maybe we're just trying to prolong the game when there's a new boss coming up that has a lot more health, or, you know, talking about how characters are supposed to be the smart ones in the story, those sorts of things. It really just helps to make the story, as basic as it is, a little bit more memorable. It also makes it clear that the devs know what they're doing and that they can lean into it, because oftentimes games like this, especially if they're lower budget, they're indie titles, they're single developer projects, they can come off as very immature and very just kind of cringeworthy instead of humorous. But this game definitely pulls it off well, where it's like, hey, we know that this is inspired by something like Pokemon, and we're going to have a little bit of fun with it, which is a nice breath of fresh air. And as kind of a bonus, there was definitely a few plot twists that actually landed, and they were unexpected. And I'm not going to give any spoilers or anything like that, but they certainly add to the experience. If you guys purchase this game, or if you're here after playing the game and you know what I'm talking about, buy those story plot twists or the story twists, go ahead and leave a comment down below. It is actually very, very well done. We're going on to the variety now. So obviously in any sort of a creature collector, creature battler game, you need to have a lot of creatures to work with. Now there's over 300 of them in this game alone. There's a wide range of designs. They almost all have unique abilities with very little overlap, and every player can build a unique team with, you know, really good depth as well as synergy options, which is fantastic, right? And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But there's plenty for you to explore in terms of, you know, going out and just continually running through the grass how you would back in the day in the Pokemon games to try and get the rare spawns, to just finding new enemy types or new creature varieties when you're exploring caves or the new places in the world that get unlocked for you. It was super, super entertaining to see what kind of designs and names they'd come up with next, and I was always on the edge of my seat when it came to seeing how the creatures were evolving as well and what they would turn into and how cool it would look. Combat, it's very simplistic, but in the right way. So it's classic turn-based setup as you'd expect from a game like this, which is very easy to grasp and enjoy. All of the abilities have their own descriptions. Their costs are marked clearly so you can see exactly what is going on. And it's perfectly tuned to what the game aims to be. So it's not, you know, too hit point heavy on the enemies or on yourself, so you're not just sitting there tanking hits back and forth. And then everybody's not a glass cannon either, which again we'll talk about a little bit further here in the next point, which is the customization. So you're going to have a lot of flexible as well as fun builds that you can use inside Nexomon, so you can shape your team however you like. And let me explain this a little bit. When you're actually inside the menu and managing your Nexomon, you can actually change which abilities they have equipped. So from what I could see in the game, almost every single Nexomon has a minimum of 4 to 5 abilities that they can equip. Some of them have like 8 or 9 abilities that they can have equipped, but you can only equip, I believe it's 4 at a time, so you have to choose very specifically which ones that you want on them on their active gameplay side of things. So you have, let's say, 8 abilities you can use, but you can only have 4 of them equipped at a time, which means that you can have a plethora of builds even for the same Nexomon, which is fantastic. So, and you can switch these out at any point as well, and they're gated behind levels. So for example, in some of the older Pokemon games, you'd have to evolution cancel, so you could keep leveling them to get them to a certain level, then unlock an ability that way. That does not seem to be the case in this game. You simply just get to a certain level with your Nexomon and you unlock that ability. You can see inside their charts when that ability unlocks, and then you have it available for use, which is fantastic. And it allows you to build, you know, glass cannons, right? So if you want to have a particular Nexomon that is just all out, hey, I'm going to do big damage, I don't care about my stamina conservation, I have potions I can use if I want to, I'm going to fucking hit you into the ground, right? The alternative is you can build tanks, right? Where it's like, hey, I'm going to heal up a bunch, I'm going to block hits, I'm just going to let the enemy wear out their stamina, and then I'm going to switch out to a glass cannon and do a lot of damage. Or you can build a hybrid where it's like, hey, I want a little bit of damage, I want a bit of healing, I want some defensive capabilities, I want some debuffs for the enemy team. And I super enjoyed the team building aspect of this game, because obviously, as you may know, I come from Raid Shadow Legends, Watcher of Realms, where everybody has abilities and you need to build certain team compositions to get through tough content. And having an aspect like that into a creature collector game is fantastic. It's a lot of fun, and it adds obviously meaningful player choice even with the very simplistic battle structure, because if you bring nothing but glass cannons inside your team, you're going to struggle to survive. You're going to struggle to be able to get through battles where you have multiple Nexomon to go against. And it's going to be a pretty solid lesson early on. Now let's go ahead and move on to the UI. The UI is clean and efficient in my opinion, so everything is easy to find, easy to interact with. All of the menu options are very clear-cut what they do. There's no guessing what you're interacting with. Even when you're out exploring in the world, there's no unnecessary clutter on the screen. This game looks fantastic, right? And that does continue over to the UI, the user interface, right? So you don't need to worry about, you know, random pop-ups happening. You don't need to worry about random menu options that don't make any sense like we see in a lot of modern games. It's straight to the point. No unnecessary clutter, which definitely helps the pace of the game. If you're trying to find potions or something like that, right, you're good to go. Now, finally, one other thing I wanted to call out is the achievements, and this is the Steam achievements specifically. So, with a lot of games we see, you'll have Steam achievements where, you know, 85% of players have like the first achievement in the game, but then it quickly drops off from there to where some of the rarest achievements are only achieved by like 0.5% of the player base. So I was actually looking at the Assassin's Creed, the newest Assassin's Creed game recently, Shadows I believe it's called, and some of the rarest achievements in that are like under 2% completion rate. And there's also a huge disparity between the first couple of achievements where it's like, hey, complete your first mission, to the next one where it's like, hey, kill this boss, right? There's usually like a 10, 15, 20% jump there. Inside Nexomon, the Steam achievements, the rarest one possible in the game, which is to collect every single Nexomon, so that's 310 Nexomon in total, is a 5.8% completion rate. If you don't follow Steam achievements, it's hard to state how incredible that is, right? So there's not much of a gap between the lowest completion rate and the highest completion rate of these achievements, which simply put, if you want to get past all the jargon, when people play this game, they stick around and they finish this game, right? Which indicates, obviously, that players are having fun, players are engaged, and the players are motivated to continue exploring the world unlocking the next achievement, and there's just significant player retention, which is really fantastic to see. A lot of smaller titles like this really struggle with player retention because oftentimes it can feel very samey. You know, the designs might not be what you want them to be. Clearly, that is not an issue with Nexomon, and that is backed up anecdotally by my own experience, as well as the Steam achievements. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, we also have some negatives to talk about, so let's go ahead and do that now. So let's go ahead and talk through some of the negatives with the game. The story towards the end definitely does get very, very repetitive. So the early story, the mid story, and even the start of the end story, the end game story, is very playful, fun, lighthearted, but it certainly starts to feel really dragged out. And some arcs actually recycle essentially the same beats, so to speak, right? So you actually end up fighting the same enemy multiple times, and it just really starts to lose momentum, to the point where it's just, you know, a slog fest, essentially. So that kind of lets the game down. Another little bit of a weakness is the small world with not really any sort of exploration. Now, this is kind of a consistent theme for a creature battler game, but the map does feel very tight. Not much incentive to explore beyond very basic item pickups. There's not really any secret areas. There's no real side quests. There's not any sort of discovery to the game. It's pretty much just you run around, you get everything you need to for the main story, and it is what it is, right? And again, this is what we've seen in the original games that inspired this one, so it's not entirely shocking, but it is still a little bit disappointing. And finally, for the negatives, the endgame bosses are just HP sponges. So the final encounters in the game, they don't feel all that epic. They don't feel very cool, right? It's basically just a straight, like, 10 plus boss battles back to back to back to back, which you're fighting enemies that are going to have thousands of hit points, where it's basically just continuous, hey, I need to attack, I need to attack, I need to attack, I need to attack. There's not really anything cool in terms of strategy, apart from obviously just making sure that your affinities or your attributes match up positively to being able to do more damage to them. And they're just regular enemies with bloated health pools, essentially. There's not really any sort of a mechanical challenge to the final enemies, specifically. So the game is fantastic up to essentially the very end of the story, where it kind of just falls off a cliff. But everything up to that point is fantastically well done, so I'm thinking it might have been just an issue where the developers ran out of time or motivation and they just needed to ship the product, and so things got a little bit rushed. But all that being said, now let's go ahead and sum the game up and talk about the final thoughts and rating. Now, to give the final summary on Nexomon, it does not hide its inspirations at all, but that's certainly part of the charm, and it really nails the lighthearted tone, which offers deep enough team building and, you know, delivers a satisfying kind of nostalgic experience with modern polish, which is kind of a win-win for anyone who might be wanting to experience what the older Pokemon games were like but don't have the ability to play them, or they just want to play a very solid creature battler game. The small world, though, and the late game fatigue are definitely a negative, but they certainly don't ruin what is otherwise a very well-crafted and fun game. So that is something to consider as well, because I know that I went pretty hard on those aspects of it, but I had a lot of fun overall. Now let's go ahead and go through the SWAS meter breakdown here, ladies and gentlemen. So first of all, we have the story, which earned a 7 out of 10. So it's very, you know, meta-defining, or meta-defined. It's a lot of, you know, fourth wall breaks. It's funny, and it's even surprising in certain parts, but like I mentioned, it certainly loses steam towards the end, so I could really only give it a 7 out of 10. The world also got a 7 out of 10, so it's a very solid presentation overall, but there's very limited scale and discovery and exploration, which are big, big things in these reviews, in case you guys haven't noticed by now. The action gets a 9 out of 10, so it's going to be fast, clean combat with a lot of really great customization options, which just is a lot of fun overall. The sound is going to get a 7 out of 10, so it's serviceable, it's clean, though it doesn't really stand out. The soundtracks are very repetitive. You'll literally hear it loop after like 3 minutes when you're exploring the open areas of the world. That being said, though, some of the soundtracks are very, very catchy, so I got to give them some credit there. And then finally, we have the style, which is actually going to be a 9 out of 10 as well. So it has a very strong visual identity. So you can look at this game and you can easily tell, yep, that's Nexomon. You're not going to confuse it with any other game. It has a very clean UI, which I absolutely love, and it has a charming presentation overall. It's very enjoyable to look at. So overall, those added up and averaged out is going to give us a 7.8 rating on the game, which means that it is pretty decent, right? It's almost an 8 out of 10. It's a 7.8 out of 10. So definitely go ahead and pick it up. I would recommend probably waiting for a sale just to make sure that you get the best bang out of your buck. I know Humble Bundle has it quite frequently on their website on sale as well. You can get it, on Steam, for example. So wishlist it the next time it goes on sale for a summer sale. Go ahead and pick it up. It's a fantastic one to play through. Thank you guys all so much for watching, though, and I'll see you next time.